Roseville, a small and seemingly peaceful town in Minnesota, became the setting for one of the most shocking and tragic crimes that would leave the entire community reeling. Behind the quiet streets and suburban homes, a terrible crime unfolded. Dena Carlson beat her own daughter, Kayla Carlson, to death. The complex and dysfunctional dynamics within their household, Dena's overwhelming jealousy, and Kayla's hidden secret all culminated in a heart-wrenching tragedy. To understand what drove Dena to commit such a horrific act, we must delve into Kayla's life and the factors that pushed her mother to the brink. Kayla Carlson was an 18-year-old high school senior at Roseville High School. Described by friends and teachers as quiet and thoughtful, Kayla's calm exterior masked the turmoil that existed within her home life. On the surface, she seemed like any other teenager, dealing with the usual stresses of finishing high school and planning her future. But behind closed doors, Kayla was living in an environment filled with tension, instability, and a toxic relationship with her mother, Dena. Dena Carlson was not a stranger to struggle. She had faced years of personal battles, including a long-term battle with alcoholism that strained her relationships. Her marriage to David Carlson, Kayla's stepfather, had its share of problems as well. Dena was deeply insecure, especially when it came to her appearance and aging. As Kayla blossomed into a young woman, Dena began to feel increasingly threatened by her daughter's youth and beauty. These insecurities soon turned into jealousy, a jealousy that would poison the fragile relationship between mother and daughter. Dena's jealousy of Kayla didn't just stem from her daughter's appearance. It was also rooted in the growing attention Kayla received from boys. As Kayla became more confident in herself and started dating, Dena felt sidelined. She saw her daughter as a rival, someone who was beginning to take the spotlight from her. This competitive tension only worsened as time went on, creating a hostile environment within the household. But the real breaking point in their relationship came when Dena discovered an unforgivable secret. Kayla had been having an inappropriate relationship with her stepfather, David Carlson. David, a man with a history of domestic disputes, had become increasingly distant from Dena. He and Dena had shared a tumultuous relationship, filled with arguments and periods of tension. However, as David's relationship with Dena soured, his attention turned toward Kayla, creating a deeply troubling and toxic dynamic in the home. Kayla, afraid and ashamed, kept this secret hidden. She knew the relationship with David was wrong, but she felt trapped, overwhelmed by guilt and fear of her mother's reaction. David's manipulation and the dysfunctional family environment left her feeling like there was no way out. Her dreams of leaving home, attending community college, and starting a new life felt increasingly out of reach as the situation at home deteriorated. Dena, oblivious at first to the nature of Kayla's relationship with David, grew increasingly suspicious. Her jealousy toward her daughter became more intense, and she began to notice small signs that something was wrong. Dena's emotional instability and dependence on alcohol only exacerbated her insecurities, clouding her judgment and pushing her closer to a dangerous breaking point. As time passed, the tension in the house escalated. Kayla's once hopeful dreams of escaping to Arizona and starting a new life seemed impossible as she became entangled in the toxic web of her family's secrets. She continued to plan her escape, secretly saving money and applying to community colleges. However, the strain of hiding her relationship with David and dealing with her mother's unpredictable behavior weighed heavily on her. The tension between Dena and Kayla grew unbearable, and the lines between mother and daughter blurred, as Dena began to view Kayla not as her child, but as a threat. Then came the fateful day of March 26, 2017. On that night, everything changed. Dena, already in a state of emotional turmoil and likely under the influence of alcohol, discovered Kayla's plan to leave home. But that wasn't all she discovered. At some point, Dena became aware of Kayla's affair with David. It's unclear whether this discovery happened through a confrontation or if Dena pieced it together on her own. Either way, it was enough to send her into a violent rage. What followed was an explosion of pent-up jealousy, betrayal, and fury. Fueled by years of insecurity and the belief that her daughter had not only betrayed her but stolen the one person she had left, David, Dena attacked Kayla. The rage blinded her, and she beat Kayla mercilessly, using both her fists and household objects to inflict brutal injuries. Kayla, unable to defend herself against the assault, was left unconscious. But the violence didn't end there. After beating her daughter to the point of unconsciousness, Dena, in a moment of cold calculation, made the horrific decision to dispose of Kayla's body. She dragged her daughter's lifeless form into her car and drove to the parking lot of Roseville High School. The blizzard that was sweeping through the town that night provided her with the cover she needed. Dena left Kayla's body partially covered in snow, hoping that the elements would conceal her crime. Kayla's body would remain there for hours, exposed to the freezing cold, before being discovered by a maintenance worker the next morning. By the time help arrived, it was too late. Kayla was already dead, the cause of death ruled as hypothermia. However, the injuries on her body told the real story. She had been beaten brutally before being left in the freezing weather to die. The discovery of Kayla's body sent shockwaves through Roseville. What had initially appeared to be a tragic accident was quickly revealed to be something far more sinister. The signs of trauma on her body pointed to foul play, and an investigation into her death began almost immediately. The truth about Kayla's tumultuous home life, her secret relationship with David, and Dena's jealousy soon unraveled, revealing the horrifying events that led to her death. The discovery of Kayla Carlson's body in the high school parking lot sent shockwaves through the small community of Roseville. At first, there was confusion, as no one could immediately understand how an 18-year-old girl had ended up dead in such a brutal and chilling manner. The icy morning of March 28, 2017, when a maintenance worker found Kayla's body partially covered in snow, marked the beginning of a dark investigation that would uncover secrets no one was prepared to face. Kayla's body showed clear signs of trauma, and it quickly became evident that her death was no accident. The autopsy revealed a shocking truth: while her official cause of death was hypothermia, the bruises and injuries on her body indicated that she had been violently beaten before being left outside in the freezing cold. The investigators were immediately suspicious of foul play, and the case was treated as a homicide from the outset. Detective Sarah Monroe, a seasoned investigator with Roseville Police, took charge of the case. As she examined the crime scene and spoke to witnesses, it became clear that this wasn't a random act of violence. There was something deeply personal about the way Kayla had been left in such a vulnerable state. Monroe knew she needed to look closer at Kayla's personal life, and soon, the complexities of Kayla's family dynamics began to surface. The first people the police questioned were Kayla's parents, her mother, Dena Carlson, and her stepfather, David Carlson. The officers found Dena at home, and she appeared to be in shock when they delivered the news of Kayla's death. Dena, pale and disoriented, claimed that she had no idea what had happened to her daughter, insisting that Kayla must have gone out during the night and gotten lost in the snowstorm. David, on the other hand, seemed strangely distant, his reaction subdued and mechanical as he confirmed Kayla hadn't been home that night. While the initial questioning didn't raise any immediate alarms, Detective Monroe's instincts told her that something was off. Dena's behavior was erratic, one moment sobbing uncontrollably, the next growing defensive when asked about Kayla's life at home. David's cold demeanor also set off alarm bells. Why wasn't he more upset about the loss of his stepdaughter? Why did he seem so detached from the situation? As Monroe delved deeper into Kayla's background, troubling details began to emerge. Interviews with Kayla's classmates and teachers revealed that she had been a quiet, introverted student, often keeping to herself. But those closest to her knew she had been struggling with more than just the usual teenage pressures. Friends confided that Kayla had a strained relationship with her mother, Dena, and that their household had been marked by constant tension. There were whispered rumors about fights between Kayla and her mother, some of which had even escalated into violence. Monroe began to piece together a profile of Dena Carlson that painted a troubling picture. Dena, a woman in her mid-40s, had long battled with alcoholism and emotional instability. Her drinking had worsened over the years, and it was no secret in the community that Dena and David's marriage had been turbulent. Neighbors reported hearing loud arguments from their home on more than one occasion, and there were multiple police records of domestic disputes between Dena and David. The investigation took a darker turn when Monroe uncovered a disturbing secret. Kayla had been having an inappropriate relationship with her stepfather, David. Digital messages retrieved from Kayla's phone revealed an ongoing affair that had started months before her death. Kayla, trapped between feelings of guilt and fear, had kept this relationship hidden, but it had clearly taken a toll on her. The messages showed that Kayla had been planning to escape the toxic environment at home, applying to community colleges in other states, and making plans to leave Roseville for good. Her ultimate goal was to move to Arizona, far away from her troubled household, and start a new life. The revelation of the affair added a new layer of complexity to the investigation. It now seemed that Kayla had been caught in a deadly triangle between her mother and stepfather. Detective Monroe theorized that Dena's jealousy and emotional fragility had been pushed to the breaking point by the discovery of Kayla's relationship with David. Dena, already insecure about her own aging and declining relationship with David, would have felt utterly betrayed, not only by her daughter but by her husband as well. The investigation intensified when Monroe and her team brought Dena in for further questioning. This time, Dena was visibly more nervous, and cracks in her story began to appear. She admitted to having confrontations with Kayla, blaming her daughter for the tension in the household. When pressed about the night of Kayla's death, Dena became evasive, struggling to maintain her composure. Monroe could see that Dena was unraveling under the weight of her lies, but there was still no concrete evidence directly tying her to Kayla's murder. Meanwhile, David Carlson became a prime suspect in the case as well. His history of domestic violence and the inappropriate relationship with Kayla made him a strong candidate for the crime. Monroe knew that David had as much motive as Dena to want to keep Kayla's secret quiet. David was questioned extensively, but his responses remained cold and calculated. He denied any involvement in Kayla's death and claimed that the relationship had ended months before the incident. The tension surrounding the case grew as Monroe faced mounting pressure to solve the crime. The small community of Roseville was in an uproar, shocked that such a tragedy had occurred in their quiet town. Candlelight vigils were held in memory of Kayla, and her friends and teachers mourned the loss of a promising young woman whose life had been cut short by violence and betrayal. It wasn't until the police received a critical tip from one of Kayla's friends that the investigation finally broke open. The friend revealed that Kayla had confided in her about a huge argument with her mother on the night of March 26, just before she went missing. According to Kayla's friend, Kayla had been on the verge of leaving home for good, but her mother had discovered her plans, and, more importantly, had found out about the affair with David. Armed with this new information, Detective Monroe confronted Dena one last time. Under intense pressure, Dena finally broke down. In a tearful confession, she admitted to attacking Kayla in a fit of rage. Dena explained how she had discovered Kayla's relationship with David and had felt utterly betrayed. Fueled by alcohol and jealousy, Dena had confronted her daughter, and the argument quickly escalated into violence. Dena had beaten Kayla with her fists and various household objects before Kayla fell unconscious. Panicking, Dena had dragged her daughter's body into her car and driven to the high school parking lot, where she abandoned her in the freezing snow, hoping the storm would cover her crime. With Dena Carlson's tearful confession in hand, the police moved quickly to formally charge her with the murder of her daughter, Kayla. The tragic details of the case sent shockwaves through Roseville, but the arrest of Kayla's mother added an even more disturbing layer to the unfolding story. What had started as a suspicion of foul play had now fully unraveled into a sordid tale of jealousy, betrayal, and murder within the walls of the Carlson household. On April 1, 2017, Dena was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. The news of her arrest spread rapidly through the small town, and the media quickly picked up the case, sensationalizing the story of a mother driven to kill her daughter over an illicit affair with her stepfather. Roseville, once a quiet and close-knit community, became the focus of national attention as reporters descended upon the town to cover the gruesome details of Kayla's death. David Carlson, meanwhile, became a person of intense scrutiny as well. Though Dena had confessed to the actual murder, it was David's inappropriate relationship with Kayla that had ignited the firestorm within the Carlson household. His role in the entire tragedy could not be ignored, and while he had not directly participated in the murder, his actions had undeniably contributed to the toxic atmosphere that led to Kayla's death. The prosecution against Dena Carlson prepared to argue that the murder was motivated by jealousy and rage, painting a picture of a mother who had become unhinged after discovering the relationship between her daughter and her husband. In their narrative, Dena's fragile emotional state, compounded by her alcoholism and her insecurities about her appearance and age, had driven her to commit the violent act. They highlighted her history of erratic behavior, which had been fueled by years of conflict with her daughter and husband. The defense, however, was determined to present a different picture. Dena's defense attorney argued that while her actions were indeed terrible, they had not been premeditated. Instead, they framed the murder as a crime of passion, committed in the heat of the moment after Dena discovered the devastating betrayal. The defense worked to garner sympathy for Dena, emphasizing her struggles with mental health and alcohol dependency, and portraying her as a broken woman who had reached a breaking point. As the trial date approached, the tension in Roseville only grew. Kayla's friends and former classmates were torn between grief and shock, struggling to reconcile the image of the quiet, thoughtful girl they knew with the horrific circumstances of her death. For many, the idea that Kayla had been involved in a secret affair with her stepfather was almost impossible to comprehend. The community, already reeling from the tragedy, was further divided by the knowledge that David, a man who had once been respected in their town, had played such a damaging role in Kayla's life. In the courtroom, the trial began with the prosecution laying out the full, grim details of the case. They presented evidence of the affair between Kayla and David Carlson, using text messages and emails as proof of the inappropriate relationship. These messages showed how deeply conflicted Kayla had been, caught between her feelings for David and her overwhelming guilt for betraying her mother. The prosecution argued that this affair, combined with Kayla's plan to leave home, had pushed Dena over the edge. They detailed the events of the night of March 26, when Dena had confronted Kayla about her relationship with David. According to the prosecution's timeline, Dena had likely been drinking heavily that night, as was her habit during times of stress. Fueled by a mixture of alcohol, jealousy, and feelings of betrayal, Dena had attacked Kayla in a violent rage. The prosecution described how Dena had used her fists and household objects to beat Kayla into unconsciousness before dumping her daughter's body in the high school parking lot, where Kayla ultimately died of hypothermia. The defense countered by focusing on Dena's emotional state at the time of the attack. They argued that Dena had not gone into the confrontation with the intent to kill. Instead, they claimed, she had been blindsided by the discovery of the affair and Kayla's plan to leave home, which triggered an overwhelming emotional response. They described Dena as a woman struggling with deep-seated insecurities and a long history of mental health issues that had never been properly addressed. Her drinking had worsened over the years, and on that fateful night, the defense claimed, Dena had been too intoxicated to fully comprehend what she was doing. In a dramatic moment during the trial, Dena herself took the stand. Her testimony was marked by tears and visible remorse as she recounted the events of that terrible night. She admitted to feeling overwhelmed by jealousy and hurt when she discovered that her daughter, the girl she had raised, was having an affair with her husband. Dena described how, in her intoxicated state, she had confronted Kayla, intending to talk but quickly losing control when the argument escalated. She tearfully confessed that she didn't remember all the details of the attack, but she acknowledged that she had caused her daughter's death and was deeply sorry for what had happened. The courtroom was silent as Dena described the moment when she realized what she had done. After the assault, she had panicked, dragging Kayla's unconscious body to her car and driving her to the high school parking lot. Dena admitted that she had hoped the blizzard would cover her tracks, a desperate and irrational attempt to hide the crime. She broke down on the stand, expressing regret but also trying to justify her actions as the result of a broken heart and a shattered sense of trust. Despite Dena's remorse, the prosecution remained firm in their argument that this was more than just a crime of passion, it was an act of cruelty, fueled by years of resentment and jealousy. They pushed for a harsh sentence, insisting that Dena's actions had been reckless and selfish, leading to the senseless death of her daughter. The defense, meanwhile, pleaded for leniency, arguing that Dena's unstable mental state and her alcohol dependency should be taken into account. The jury deliberated for several days, considering the complex emotions and motivations behind the crime. Was Dena a cold-blooded murderer, driven by jealousy and hatred? Or was she a broken woman who had made a terrible, irreversible mistake in a moment of weakness? The community waited anxiously for the verdict, knowing that whatever the outcome, the scars left by Kayla's death would linger for years to come. Finally, the jury returned with their decision. Dena Carlson was found guilty of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison, a punishment that reflected both the severity of her crime and the tragic circumstances surrounding it. The courtroom was filled with a mix of emotions. Some felt justice had been served, while others saw only more heartbreak in a case where there were no true winners. With Dena Carlson sentenced to 25 years to life for the murder of her daughter, Kayla, the tragic case left an indelible mark on the community of Roseville. Even as the legal proceedings came to a close, the emotional fallout continued to ripple through the lives of those who had known Kayla, her family, and the broader community. The trial had been a painful and revealing process for the residents of Roseville, exposing the dark undercurrents that had existed within the Carlson household. While many had been shocked by the affair between Kayla and her stepfather, David, others were equally horrified by the depths of Dena's jealousy and the violent lengths she had gone to in order to deal with her emotions. The town, once united in its grief for Kayla's death, was now fractured by differing views on who was ultimately to blame for the tragedy. David Carlson, the man whose relationship with Kayla had sparked the violent events leading to her death, was left to face the wreckage of his life. While he had not been directly charged in relation to Kayla's murder, his reputation in Roseville was utterly ruined. The affair had exposed David not only as an unfaithful husband but as someone who had exploited the vulnerability of a young woman in his care. In the wake of the trial, David withdrew from public life. He sold the family home and moved out of Roseville, hoping to escape the judgmental gazes of the town's residents. His attempt to start fresh was hindered by the lingering guilt and the irreversible damage caused by his actions. Wherever he went, the shadow of his involvement in Kayla's life, and her death, followed him. The stigma surrounding his inappropriate relationship with his stepdaughter made it nearly impossible for him to rebuild any semblance of a normal life. Despite his efforts to move on, David remained haunted by the choices he had made. His guilt over his role in the destruction of his family, and Kayla's untimely death, consumed him. Though not legally accountable for her murder, David's moral responsibility weighed heavily on his conscience. He became a recluse, shunned by the people who had once been his friends and colleagues, living in a state of self-imposed exile and regret. One person particularly affected by the tragedy was Lucas Doyle, Kayla's ex-boyfriend. Lucas had been close to Kayla during her final months, and though they had broken up, he had never stopped caring about her. The revelation that she had been involved in a secret relationship with her stepfather was a devastating blow, leaving Lucas filled with a mixture of anger, confusion, and profound sadness. Lucas struggled with guilt after Kayla's death, replaying their last conversations over and over in his mind. He questioned whether he could have done something to help her, whether he had missed any signs that she was in distress. In the weeks leading up to her death, Kayla had become more withdrawn, but Lucas had assumed it was simply the result of their breakup. He had no idea that she was carrying such a heavy burden. In the months following the trial, Lucas sought counseling to cope with his grief and unresolved feelings for Kayla. The loss of his first love, combined with the trauma of her murder and the disturbing revelations about her home life, left deep emotional scars. Lucas became an advocate for mental health awareness among his peers, speaking out about the importance of supporting friends who may be struggling in silence. He often wondered if things could have turned out differently if someone had been there for Kayla during her darkest moments. The community of Roseville, once tight-knit, found itself grappling with the after-effects of the tragedy. Many residents had known the Carlson family in passing but were unaware of the turmoil brewing beneath the surface. The case became a harsh reminder that domestic violence, mental health struggles, and family secrets could lurk in even the most seemingly ordinary households. In response to the overwhelming grief and shock, local schools and community organizations began hosting events aimed at raising awareness about domestic violence, mental health, and the warning signs of abusive relationships. Kayla's story became a rallying point for discussions about how to better support young people in crisis and how to create safe spaces where they could seek help without fear of judgment or retribution. Vigils were held in Kayla's memory, and her former classmates organized a scholarship fund in her name to help other students who came from troubled homes pursue their education. The scholarship became a symbol of hope and healing for the community, a way to honor Kayla's dreams of leaving her turbulent home life behind and starting anew. But despite these efforts, the memory of Kayla's murder remained a painful scar on the town. Many in Roseville continued to struggle with the enormity of the tragedy, finding it difficult to reconcile the image of a mother murdering her own daughter. Conversations about the case often circled back to the question of how something so horrific could have happened in their quiet town, and whether there had been any signs that could have prevented it. For those who had known Kayla, her death left a void that could never be filled. Friends remembered her as a thoughtful, kind, and creative soul who had once dreamed of escaping the confines of her troubled home to explore the wider world. She had spoken about her plans to attend community college and eventually move to Arizona, where she hoped to build a new life far from the chaos of her family. In the years following her death, Kayla's friends and teachers continued to remember her through annual memorial events, keeping her legacy alive by advocating for the causes she had cared about. While the story of her death was a tragic one, those who had loved her were determined to ensure that her memory would not be defined solely by the violence that ended her life. Her death also served as a cautionary tale for the broader public. It underscored the dangers of untreated mental health issues, unresolved family conflicts, and the destructive power of jealousy and secrecy. Kayla's story was a stark reminder of the importance of early intervention in situations where emotional and psychological struggles threaten to spiral out of control. The murder of Kayla Carlson by her mother, Dena, was a tragic culmination of years of domestic tension, emotional instability, and jealousy that went unchecked for far too long. Though justice was served with Dena's sentencing, the emotional aftermath of the case lingered for years, affecting not just the Carlson family but the entire community of Roseville. Kayla's story continues to resonate with those who seek to understand the warning signs of domestic violence and emotional abuse. It serves as a haunting reminder of the fragility of life and the devastating consequences that can arise when emotional pain and jealousy are allowed to fester unchecked. The legacy of Kayla Carlson lives on, not just in the community of Roseville but in the hearts of all those who work to prevent such tragedies from happening again.